Controlling how tests are run. Just as cargo run compiles your code and then runs the resulting binary, cargo test compiles your code in test mode and runs the resulting test binary. You can specify command line options to change the default behavior of cargo test. For example, the default behavior of the binary produced by cargo test is to run all the tests in parallel and capture output generated during the test, preventing the output from being displayed and making it easier to read the output related to the test results. Some command line options go to cargo test and some go to the resulting test binary. To separate these two types of arguments, you list the arguments that go to cargo test, followed by the separator --, and then the ones that go to the test binary. Running cargo test flag help displays the options you can use with cargo test, and running cargo test separator flag help displays the options you can use after the separator. Running tests in parallel or consecutively. When you run multiple tests, by default, they run in parallel using threads. This means the tests will finish running faster so you can get feedback quicker on whether or not your code is working. Because the tests are running at the same time, make sure your tests don't depend on each other or on any shared state, including a shared environment, such as the current working directory or environment variables. For example, say each of your tests runs some code that creates a file on disk named testoutput.txt and writes some data to that file. Then each test reads the data in that file and asserts that the file contains a particular value, which is different in each test. Because the test runs at the same time, one test might overwrite the file between when another test writes and then reads the file. The second test will fail, not because the code is incorrect, but because the tests have interfered with each other while running in parallel. One solution is to make sure each test writes to a different file. Another solution is to run the tests one at a time. If you don't want to run the tests in parallel, or if you want more fine-grained control over the number of threads used, you can send the test threads flag and the number of threads you want to use to the test binary. Take a look at the following example. Cargo test separator test threads equals 1. We set the number of test threads to 1, telling the program not to use any parallelism. Running the tests using one thread will take longer than running them in parallel, but the tests won't interfere with each other if they share state. Showing function output. By default, if a test passes, Rust's test library captures anything printed to standard output. For example, if we call println in a test and the test passes, we won't see the println output in the terminal. We'll only see the line that indicates the test passed. If a test fails, we'll see whatever was printed to standard output with the rest of the failure message. As an example, listing 1110 has a silly function that prints the value of its parameter and returns 10, as well as a test that passes and a test that fails. So we've got function prints and returns 10, takes parameter a of type i32, returns an i32, println I got the value a, and then return 10. Mod test, use a superglob. First test, this test will pass. Let value equal prints and returns 10, 4. Assert equals 10 and value. Second test, this test will fail. Let value equal print and returns 10, give it 8. Assert equals 5 value. When we run these tests with cargo test, we will see the following output. Running 2 tests, tests, this test will pass, okay. Tests, this test will fail, failed. Failures, standard out, I got the value 8. And then assertion failed, left equals right, left, yep. Note that nowhere in this output do we see I got the value 4, which is what is printed when the test that passes runs. That output has been captured. The output from the test that failed, I got the value 8, appears in the section of the test summary output, which also shows the cause of the test failure. If we want to see printed values for passing tests, if we want to see printed values for passing tests as well, we can disable the output capture behavior by using the no capture flag. So we have cargo test separator and then no capture. When we run the tests in listing 1110 again with the no capture flag, we see the following output. Note that the output for the tests and the test results are interleaved. The reason is that the tests are running in parallel. As we talked about in the previous section, try using the test threads equals 1 option and the no capture flag and see what the output looks like then. Running a subset of tests by name. Sometimes running a full test suite can take a long time. If you're working on code in a particular area, you might want to run only the tests pertaining to that code. You can choose which tests to run by passing cargo test the name or names of the tests you want to run as an argument. To demonstrate how to run a subset of tests, we'll create 3 tests for our add2 function in listing 1111 and choose which ones to run. Pubfun add2 takes parameter A of type i32, returns an i32. A plus 2. Mod tests. We've got a test fun add 2 and 2, assert equals 4, add 2 with the argument 2. And then add 3 and 2. So function 100 asserts equals 102, add 2 with argument 100. If we run these tests without passing any arguments, as we saw earlier, all the tests will run in parallel. Running single tests. We can pass the name of any test function to cargo test to run only that test. So cargo test 100, and then only the test with the name 100 ran. The other 2 tests didn't match that name. The test output lets us know we had more tests than what this command ran by displaying 2 filtered out and at the end of the summary line. We can't specify the names of multiple tests in this way. Only the first value given to cargo test will be used. But there is a way to run multiple tests. Filtering to run multiple tests. We can specify part of a test name, and any test whose name matches that value will be run. For example, because 2 of our tests' names contain add, we can run those 2 by running cargo test add. This command ran all tests with add in the name and filtered out the test named 100. Also note that the module in which a test appears becomes part of the test name, so we can run all the tests in a module by filtering on the module's name. Ignoring some tests unless specifically requested. Sometimes a few specific tests can be very time-consuming to execute, so you might want to exclude them during most runs of cargo test. Rather than listing as arguments all the tests you do want to run, you can instead annotate the time-consuming tests using the ignore attribute to exclude them, as shown here. It works, assert equals assert 2 plus 2 and 4. Function expensive test, code that takes an hour to run. And here under the test flag, the test attribute, we have attribute? Yes, we have the ignore attribute. After test, we added the ignore line to the test we want to exclude. Now when we run our test, it works. Now when we run our test, it works, runs, but expensive test doesn't. The expensive test function is listed as ignored. If we want to run only the ignored tests, we can use cargo test separator flag ignored. By controlling which tests run, you can make sure your cargo test results will be fast. When you're at a point where it makes sense to check the results of the ignored tests and you have time to wait for the results, you can run cargo test separator ignored flag instead.